Yeah, hello, everyone, and welcome to the York Festival of Ideas. My name's Oleg Benish. I'm the head of the Department of History here at the University of York, and I'll be chairing the event today. Thanks to everyone for joining us. It's my great pleasure to welcome you all here, online. And before I introduce you to the speaker today, I just want to run through a few technical notes. One is that subtitles are available for this event, so to turn these on or off, please use the CC Show Captions button at the bottom of your screen. Um, if you're watching this live, you can ask questions using the Q&A button on your screen. This is available throughout the event, so questions can be posted anytime if something comes up that you notice during the talk. And please remember that today's event is being recorded, so you'll be able to watch again later as well. Now, without further ado, it's my great pleasure to introduce our speaker this morning, this evening, where he is at in Japan, Frederik Cryns. And yeah, Frederik is joining us today from Japan, where he's a professor of Japanese history at the International Research Center for Japanese Studies in Kyoto, also known as Nichibunken. He's the author of several best-selling books in Japanese on the early interaction of the Western world with Japan. And in addition to his academic work, Frederik appears regularly on Japanese television history programs, and he's also supervised the historical aspects of the recent television series Shogun. I'm very much looking forward to hearing Frederik speak today about William Adams, an English helmsman who washed ashore in Japan in 1600, and who's the subject of this fantastic new book by Frederik, which we'll hear a bit more about today. So, Frederik, over to you.
So thank you, Oleg, for the introduction, and thank you all for joining this webinar. I am originally from Belgium, but about 36 years ago, I came to Japan and I never left. I'm a historian of Japanese history, and my major is mainly the Sengoku period. The Sengoku period, which can be translated as the country at war. So this was a period in the late 15th century until the beginning of the 17th century in Japan, where you had the warriors, which are known in the West as the samurai, who fought each other constantly. And so those samurai, especially the culture of those samurai, but also the interaction of those samurai with the Western world is the major of my research. I have done, I stayed for already 36 years. I came here when I was 19, and all my life and work was in Japanese. I studied Japanese history, so for me, writing in Japanese about Japanese history was natural. But then about 4 years ago, I got a call and they asked me to become historical advisor for Shogun. So that was Hollywood. So I had to speak in English, and I have read many books in English, but I was not really very fluent in speaking it. So my work with Shogun as a historical advisor was first with a rediscovering of English as a working language. And it became for me a very nice journey because I really got fond of the language. And at a certain point, my friend Timon Screech, he said, "Why don't you write a biography on Adams in English?" This, of course, was because Shogun, the television drama, the main character is John Blackstone, but Blackstone's character is modeled on William Adams' story, on a real story of a person, an English pilot who drifted to Japan and eventually became the advisor of the Shogun. And this resonated very well with me because about 10, 15 years ago, a colleague in Leiden University in Holland, they asked me to collaborate on the Dutch trading post in Hirado. So they have a lot of documents on the Dutch trading post, which was established in 1609 in Hirado, which is a very small island on the northwestern coast of Kyushu in Japan. And I discovered a lot of new references about William Adams, because Adams had a lot of contacts with the Dutch. He came on a Dutch ship to Japan in 1600. And after that, he still kept extensive Dutch contacts. So it's quite natural that there were a lot of references in the records in the Dutch sources about him. And until now, there have been written several excellent biographies of William Adams, but most of those biographies use mainly the English sources. So I thought that with the Dutch sources combined, we could get a more fuller picture of his life. And you have the English sources, you have Dutch sources, you also have Spanish, Portuguese sources, and a few Japanese sources. So if you combine all those sources, you really have a unique record of a person living in around 1600, traveling from England all the way to Japan, and having a very great career in Japan. And mostly people from 1600, you don't have so much records, but we have a lot of records about Adams. So I thought that it would be nice just to put all those records together and make a story of it. So the television series Shogun, there's a lot of action and a lot of fiction in it. But when I saw the sources and I saw what was written about Adams, I thought you really don't need fiction. If you just write down everything that you find in the sources, you really have a compelling story of an extraordinary man. So I followed the advice of my friend and I started writing the book, which was much fun. But it was my first English book. So I think I spent just 1 year only revising it. 1 year writing it and then revising it, because my goal was to make it as readable as possible for a general public. I really wanted to, if I wrote it in academic style, it would be for a very restricted range of people. And I found his story so remarkable that I really want to have as many people read it as possible. So I tried to, my first sentences were very long, but I tried to cut them in small sentences so that many people could read it. Even school students could get through it. So what makes Adam's life so special? Well, first of all, so he stranded in Japan in 1600. And 1600, oh yes, first I have to tell something about the picture you see. So we don't have any contemporary pictures of William Adams. And so I asked one of my assistants to make a picture of him from what she thought that Adams would look like. And that is what you see here before you. It's totally fiction. Compared to my book, it's fiction, but you get a little bit an image of how he could have looked like. So Adams was born in Gillingham in Kent in 1564. And when he was 12 years of age, he became apprenticed as a navigator on the Nicholas diggings at Limehouse near London. So he learned navigation skills. And after his apprenticeship in 1588, so then he was 24 years of age, he joined the Royal Navy and took part in a naval battle against the Spanish Armada, the famous battle where the English defeated the Spanish Armada. And Adams was pilot on one of the ships who transported victuals to the scene, and probably also ammunition. And this battle, in my eyes, has had a profound influence on William Adams. It was a time that it was the Protestant Queen Elizabeth versus the Catholic King of Spain, Felipe II. So you got a very religious aspect of this battle, and there were at the time Catholic and especially Jesuit missionaries infiltrating into England to convert the Protestants and to work together with the Spanish to make England a Catholic country again. And you feel in the sources about Adams that he really cared about that, and that he was really frightened about the Catholic faith. After that battle, he joined the Barbary Company, and the Barbary Company was a company that traded with Morocco. But apart from trading, they also did privateering of Spanish ships. So here again, he was fighting against the Spanish. In 1889, he married Mary Hine and settled in Stepney, also near London. And he worked about 10 years for the Barbary Company. But after 10 years, when the Barbary Company was dissolved, he decided to join a Dutch fleet of 5 ships that was bound for Asia. It was at that time that the Dutch and the English tried to venture into Asia because the Portuguese and the Spanish had a monopoly of all the goods traded with Asia. And it was a very lucrative monopoly, especially the spice trade brought a lot of profits to those Iberian countries. And the Dutch and the English also wanted to have a piece of that trade. But they were at war with Spain, so they had to be very careful. And they tried a few times from the 1590s. Well, you have, of course, Drake and Cavendish, who ventured into Asia, but not on a permanent basis at the time. And in the 1590s, the Dutch began to dispatch fleets to Asia. And the fleet that departed from Rotterdam with William Adams aboard was one of the first fleets that tried to get to Asia. Mostly they went through the Cape of Good Hope, but Adams' fleet tried to go via the Strait of Magellan. And that was a very risky undertaking. And we have so Adams' letters describing his voyage from there to Japan. We also have Dutch sources and Spanish sources writing about that voyage. So I could reconstruct this voyage very detailed in my book. I'm not going to talk about that today. I've not enough time, but I can tell you that it really was an adventure, and I hope that sometime Hollywood would try to make a movie about this because it's really like an adventure movie. They had to face hunger, sickness, attacks from the Spanish, the Portuguese, storms, attacks from Indians in South America. So they really had everything that an adventure movie would have. And finally, in 1600, only one ship, the Liefde, which you can translate as charity, arrived in Japan with Adams aboard. So there were 5 ships who departed with about a crew of about 500 men. And most of the ships perished. There was one ship that went back to Holland, but the only ship to arrive in Japan was the Liefde, and there were only 18 people left on that ship. So you can imagine how grueling that voyage would have been. Oh, I forgot to show you the slide. So this is a slide of the battle against the Armada. And this is a slide about the voyage of the 5 ships. So they started in Rotterdam via the Downs, via Africa. They traversed the ocean and then through the Strait of Magellan, through the Pacific, and then they reached Bungo, which is again in Kyushu, the most southern island of the 4 big islands of Japan. And when they arrived in Japan, they arrived in the Sengoku period, the country at war. So everyone was fighting everyone. By the way, this is also an illustration made by one of my assistants. And so everyone tried to unify Japan, and we get 3 great unifiers. First, Oda Nobunaga, then Toyotomi Hideyoshi. And when Toyotomi Hideyoshi died in 1598, he left a council of 5 regions, among which Tokugawa Ieyasu was the most powerful. And when Adams reached Japan, we are a few months before the great battle of Sekigahara, which took place between those regions, and which Ieyasu won and made him the de facto ruler of Japan. And so Ieyasu was on top of a country that had experienced about 150 years of war, continuous war. So he had to rebuild the country. He had to rebuild the economy. He had to restore international relations because his predecessor, Hideyoshi, tried to invade Korea, threatened to invade the Philippines. So Japan was at war with all the countries around it, also China. And so he had a lot of work to do. Now, Japan at that time had connections with the West already. In 1543, the Portuguese arrived in Japan for the first time. And in 1549, the Jesuits followed. And they started the gospel in Japan, and they were quite successful. They could have a lot of Japanese turning into Christians, which alarmed Ieyasu very much. Another aspect is Ieyasu tried to to restore the relations with China, but he didn't succeed in that. And the Japanese were very dependent on China for the silk trade. So the garments of the samurai, of the nobles, the wealthy merchants were all in Chinese silk. So they needed to import Chinese silk and also other commodities, but they couldn't trade with China because they were still at war with China. So it was the Portuguese who sailed every year a ship from Macau in China to Nagasaki to bring silk. And so this was one ship. So here you see a Namban screen. This is a screen depicting such a Portuguese ship arriving in Nagasaki, Japan. And you see it's a very very large ship. It's called now in Portuguese, and the English called it the Carax, because it transported a lot of Carac porcelain. And those ships were about 1,500 tons. So they could transport 1 year of commodities that were necessary in Japan. So in this way, the Portuguese really had a monopoly of Japan's foreign trade. And Tokugawa Ieyasu didn't like that because a monopoly, of course, brings much higher import prices, which put a burden on Japan's economy. And also, you can see here on the right side, if I make it a little bit bigger. So here you see the Portuguese merchants arriving in Nagasaki, and you see the Jesuit priests welcoming them. So because of this Portuguese trade, the Jesuits were in a very privileged position. The Japanese rulers wanted to get rid of the Jesuits because they feared of their influence, of the influence of the Christian faith. Not of the faith as such, but because there were some Christian warlords, there were many Christian samurai, and they could plot together with the Spanish and the Portuguese to overthrow the Japanese rulers. So they wanted, and especially Ieyasu wanted to get rid of those Jesuits and of Christianity as a whole. So that was another reason why he wanted to have other routes for his trade. And so he tried to get contacts with the Spanish in the Philippines, but they were also Catholics. And he also tried to send Japanese junks to all parts of Asia, like Patani, where the Chinese junks also came to trade there for silks. But it was not enough. He still had this Portuguese monopoly. So it's at this time that De Liefde and Adams reached Bungo. And the Portuguese, of course, they immediately went to the magistrates and said, oh, these are pirates, you have to execute them, you have to ban them from Japan, because for them, they were at war with the Dutch and the English, and they also feared for their monopoly. But Ieyasu wouldn't listen to them, and he invited Adams and Jan Joost, a Dutchman from the fleet, to come to Osaka, because at that time Ieyasu was stationed in the castle of Osaka. This is a picture of Tokugawa Ieyasu. And here you see a publication of the letters of William Adams. So after he came to Japan, William Adams sent several letters to England, to his wife, to people he knew in England, and also to people he didn't knew, just to my countrymen, to relate what had happened on his voyage and when he came to Japan. And these letters were published fairly soon, I think in the first one already in 1624 or something. And this is a later publication, but those letters were well known in Europe at the time. And in those letters, he writes about the interrogations he got with Ieyasu, because Ieyasu questioned him in person. And so for example, here you see, I showed unto him the name of our country, and that our land had long sought out the East Indies and desired friendship with all kings and potentates in way of merchandise, having in our land diverse commodities which these lands had not, and also to buy such merchandises in this land which our country had not. So when he told about this to Ieyasu, you can imagine that Ieyasu was very interested in this person, this Englishman who came from a country he hadn't heard of until then. And so perhaps there were other countries apart from the Portuguese and the Spaniards who could come to Japan and trade and perhaps bring in Chinese silks and so on. So far from executing Adams, he made him his advisor. And so in the beginning, he became really what we know from Adams' letters and also from other letters from people who visited Japan afterwards. Adams became a kind of tutor to Ieyasu. He informed him about the state of affairs in the world. He learned him mathematics, geometrics. He showed him maps and so on. And we know that Ieyasu was really a person who wanted to learn new things, who was very interested in new technologies and so on. So we can imagine that he was very fond of talking to Adams. And so they became quite close. And Adams was asked to build 2 large Western sailing ships for Ieyasu. So he built one in 1604, around 1604, an 80-ton ship, and then 2 years later, a 120-ton ship. You could think that, oh, he made a ship, and then what then? But making ships requires a lot of technology. And by making those ships, so he did that in collaboration with the Dutch crew of the Liefde, but also with the Japanese artisans, the Japanese shipbuilders. So because he built those ships, the Japanese could absorb a lot of technology from the English and the Dutch. And it's because of that the Japanese began to build junks with Western technology. So a bit a hybrid between Western galleons and Chinese junks. And that allowed the Japanese to get more ships sailing to all parts of Asia to augment their trade, which was really what Ieyasu wanted. And Adams also acted as a mediator for trade relations with the Netherlands and England. So he wrote letters to the English and to the Dutch. And so the Dutch arrived in Japan in 1609, the English a little bit later in 1613, and both established trading posts in Hirado. And because of all those, oh, this is again one of my assistants who made this picture of how the ship would have been constructed. We have made an animation of the life of Adams and put it on YouTube. So if you have any interest, please go to YouTube and surely be sure to watch it. This is a map made in 1621 by the Dutch of Hirado. And if I make it a little bit, so here you see the Dutch trading post, the Dutch flag, and then here you have the English trading post. So, and in between you have the castle of. It's a very rudimentary picture, but you can see if you go to Hirado nowadays, it fairly looks the same as in this picture. And here you can see a picture made in the Edo period, so a little bit after Adam's death, and it's written Hemimura, and Hemimura is the village that William Adams received for his services, because Adams became a hatamoto, and a hatamoto means a person who can meet the shogun directly. Now, there were not many people who could meet with the shogun. There was only a small retinue of people. So you have his family, of course. You have his counselors. You have his direct retainers. And then you have all those lords in Japan, which were called daimyo. And so when they met with the shogun, it was really, they had to sit many tatami, so straw mats, away from the shogun, and the only thing they could do was bow and then go away. And if you are a lesser daimyo, you weren't even allowed to come into the room where the shogun was. So for a Westerner, for an Englishman to become a hatamoto and to go into the room where the shogun was and speak with the shogun intimately, that was something that was unheard of. And even today in Japan, you can see here, so Hemi, this is written, this picture was made probably more than 200 years after Adam's death, and still you have here Anjin Yashiki, which means the pilot's residence, because William Adams was called Miura Anjin, the pilot of Miura. Now, Miura was the peninsula where Hemi village was situated, so he was called the pilot of the Miura Peninsula. And you see here the Jodoji, so there is a temple just near his residence, and I spoke to the priest, and he said that until I'm not sure, the 1980s, I think, still there were sent presents from Tokyo to this temple in memory of William Adams. So you can imagine how highly he was seen in Japan at the time. So how could he do that? How could he become so valued by the shogun? Well, I think first of all, Ieyasu was the first shogun of the Tokugawa shogunate, and he still had some freedom. After his son became shogun, everything became more and more rigid. while Ieyasu still could how you say assemble around him people who he thought had great abilities to become his advisors, to rule the country in a good way. And from his son, his grandson, everything became regent. And so you really had to be, it was the son of the counselor who followed up the counselor. And there was no place anymore, certainly not for foreigners, but also for ordinary Japanese to become an advisor of the shogun, for example. So we still had this kind of freedom in Ieyasu's time, and Ieyasu was a very enlightened ruler who really much tried to get the best persons around him, and he saw Adams as a very highly skilled and able person. And also Adams had the same views on foreign policy as Ieyasu had. So you like to be with people who share the same views, of course. But also, if you look at the sources, Adams really had a honest personality, and he was not afraid to say his opinion. And people like Ieyasu, they recognized that. And Adams also could advise from a third-party perspective. William Adams, from my point of view, was really a cosmopolitan. He came from England and he did all his best to further the interests of the English people and the English nation in Japan. But he also was on very good terms with the Dutch, not with the Spanish nation, but he had Spanish friends in Japan. He had Italian friends in Japan. So his view of the world was much more broader than most of the people, the foreigners who came to Japan. And that also was very valued by Ieyasu. And Adams also had a lot of knowledge, and Ieyasu was really fond of acquiring new knowledge. So all those capabilities of Adams, from my point of view, made him the ideal person for Ieyasu to make him his advisor and be very intimate with Adams, which, as I cannot emphasize more, was really unique at the time. And in the sources, we really see a strong bond of trust between Ieyasu and Adams. But in 1616, so just after the siege of Osaka, in which the Toyotomi clan was erased and the Tokugawa became really the only political power in Japan, Ieyasu Ieyasu died in 1616, and his son Hidetada took over. And as is often the case with sons, they want to go another way. So Hidetada distanced himself from Ieyasu's advisors and pursued a totally different foreign policy. So he was much more conservative, and he began to regulate foreign trade, and he put the foreigners in two harbors, Nagasaki and Hirado. And afterwards, his son Iemitsu would go further, and he would expel all the foreigners except for the Dutch, who then had to move to Nagasaki and stay in Dejima, which was a a small island, man-made island, before Nagasaki. So they weren't allowed to come into Japan anymore. Only once a year to pay their respects to the shogun, they had to travel to Edo. The English already had left Japan in 1623. And before that, so when Hidetada took over, Adams lost all his former influence. And we see that, for example, in a letter. This letter was written to Jacques Spix, the head of the Dutch factory in Hirado, and he writes in this letter in Dutch that he tried to get through to the shogun, but he even wasn't allowed to speak with the magistrates. So he went to Edo Castle. He waited for weeks and nobody wanted to speak to him. So there was really a great change, and well, he was faced with this change, with first being the advisor of the shogun, something really, really spectacular. And then when Ieyasu died, the memory of him being the advisor of the shogun stayed, but he lost most of his influence. And so 4 years later, he died at Hirado, aged 55. So here his story ends. And well, if you have seen Shogun, you would think that Adams was really a samurai fighting alongside the shogun and so on. Well, that's fiction. So he had a remarkable life, traveling 2 years in many hardships, reaching Japan, being at risk at being executed as a pirate, but gaining the trust of the most powerful man in Japan, becoming a personal advisor of the shogun, and having a tremendous influence on his foreign policy, are things that are really remarkable and setting him out in history. Especially because he was an ordinary pilot. So I think Shogun is something I worked at 3 years, and I put a lot of myself in it. But I think the story of Adams, the real story of Adams, is also really a nice story that has to be read. And this wraps it up for my lecture.
Yeah.
Oh, this is the book.
Oh, no, thank you. Thanks so much, Frederick. That was fantastic. And yeah, as you say, it's just this amazing tale of this person put into these circumstances. I have lots of questions, but there's one already from the audience, which was what happened to Mary, his wife back in England?
Well, she stayed in England, and I think she heard that her husband was in Japan. Perhaps from in 1605, perhaps, because Adams then sent letters with Quackernack, who was the captain of his ship, and the captain got permission to depart from Japan, and then Adams sent letters with him. But it's not sure if those letters reached Mary, because the Dutch didn't want the English to know that there was an English person advisor to the shogun, but still it leaked out. So the English knew about Adam's presence in Japan. So Mary too. And in 1611, this is something that's not really known. Adams began to work for the Dutch East India Company, and he asks his wages to be paid in England to Mary. So all the wages that he should have got in Japan were sent by the Dutch to Mary Hein. And afterwards, Mary Hein, well, she was waiting for her husband to come back, but he didn't come back. So she was wanting for money to stay alive. So she also asked the English East India Company for money. And in 1613, when the English came to Japan, Adams began to work for the English East India Company. And through the English East India Company, again, money was sent to her. So Adams sent her money, and half of Adams' belongings when he died were sent to her per testament. But more is not known in the sources. We don't know what happened with her after that.
Oh, and so those letters that we don't think reached her, are those now in an archive in the Netherlands, or where do we access them?
The first letters are not extant, but we certainly have a letter from 1611, which has reached her. The letter itself is not extant, but it was published at the time. So we have the published version of the letter to her. But that's all. And we know that they were in correspondence after that. But as Mary was an individual, those letters are not extant. The letters which were sent to servants of the East India Company, of course, these are preserved. But unfortunately, not the letters sent to his wife, only in published form.
And did he have a new family in Japan then as well,
Yes,
or?
yes. So he married a Japanese lady, but we don't know anything about her. The only reference I found was in a reference by a Japanese ambassador who came to Spain and who recalled to an Englishman living there that there was a very famous Englishman living in Japan who was married to a noble lady. And you can imagine that he was a hatamoto, so let's say of the samurai class. Not really a samurai in the ways we think about samurais fighting with swords and so on, an advisor to the shogun, but he still was there. He needed to have a family, and so he needed to marry in the samurai class. So noble birth really means that he received a Japanese person from the samurai caste at the time, but more is not known about her. We only have some references in the diary of the head of the English factory in Japan, Richard Cox. He writes about seeing her sometimes, and so we know that most probably she was Catholic, and her family was Catholic, and that she was a very strong person. So I think she was a very good fit to Adams, and they had two children, boy and a girl. And the boy would become Miura Anjin, the same name as his father, and would trade in Asia on junks until 1635, when the Japanese were prohibited to depart from Japan. And very unfortunately, we don't know anything about their offspring. So probably he didn't have any children. I'm not sure about that, but there's nothing in the sources, and even the temple I talked about, those temples kept records of all the people there. And there's no reference of any offspring of William Adams' son. So that's really a pity, but unfortunately, no information whatsoever.
No, that's fascinating. I was a little bit more on where you mentioned, him having this Hatamoto status then, and obviously there are big shifts kind of going on in the status of and what the samurai are around, the turn of the 17th century, around 1600, where it becomes a bit more formalized. But I mean, you make the point at how unusual it is for someone to have that kind of status. I think recently we hear of several other kind of figures, real or fictional, who supposedly became foreign samurai in Japan. But I mean, I think Will Adams is truly exceptional here. I mean, there's not we know any others that were who might have that sort of status.
Well, another person is Jan Joosten Lodenstein. So
Mm.
he went together with Adams to Osaka Castle, and he was questioned together with Adams by Ieyasu, and he also became a Hatamoto. And he also became an advisor. It was natural for Ieyasu to have a Dutchman and an Englishman to be his advisors. I don't think he was valued as much as Adams by Ieyasu. Certainly not after that, in Ieyasu's later years. But the unfortunate thing is that Jan Joosten didn't write letters with his own experiences. And what is extraordinary about William Adams is that he really wrote in his letters everything that he experienced. And that's really a nice present for historians like me. We have several letters of Jan Joosten, but it's all about trade,
Mm.
nothing else. So we can't get really an image of what kind of person he was. Well, some people write about him, Dutch and English, all write that he was lying all the time. So he was not really trusted by the others, but that he was very good at Japanese. So he had a very good tongue, to say so. So he was also a Hatamoto, perhaps not the real intimate relationship with Adams, with ES as Adams had. There were other people before that. Of course, the story of Yasuke is now the black person. He was taken into service by Oda Nobunaga, but it's difficult to call him a samurai. So
Mm.
probably if Nobunaga wasn't killed in the Honnoji incident, perhaps he could have become a samurai after that. Before that, we have almost no information about him, only that he was in the presence of Oda Nobunaga, that Oda Nobunaga liked him very much, but more is not known about him. And that's about all I think that we have.
Mm. Well, actually, and a lot of that ties into it. One, I think, final question probably from the audience, which was on asking what language they use to communicate.
You mean in the very beginning?
I assume,
So
yeah, at the very beginning.
yes, in the very beginning, when they were interrogated by Ieyasu, they were using a interpreter who could speak Portuguese. And this interpreter was most probably a Japanese. In Shogun, we made him a Jesuit because in the novel by James Clavell, it was a Jesuit, and it's more dramatic, of course. And well, people at the time they were very quick at learning other languages. So Adams would have picked up the language very soon and was very soon able to communicate with Ieyasu in Japanese. And we know that when, for example, the Dutch came or the English came, he was translating and interpreting for them. We also know that Adams couldn't write the characters, the Chinese
Mm.
characters. So Japanese has Chinese kind of characters and has a phonetic script, which is kana, is called kana. So kana and character is called kanji. And we know that Adams could write kana. And kana was also used mostly by women and probably also by ordinary people. Using kanji was more the official language. So a little bit like Latin, perhaps
Mm.
in Europe. So he didn't reach that level, but he had a rudimentary level of writing and reading too.
Mm.
And talking was quite good, I think. You can see that in the translation he made of the letter written by King James to Ieyasu, which is a very good translation.
No. Well, thank you so much. I think that's probably about what we have time for, but thanks so much for joining us to share all these kind of fascinating stories around this. I mean, it's just such an amazing topic, and for answering the questions from the audience members as well. Thanks to everyone in the audience for attending the event. Please do check out other things that are coming up on the festival program. And just to remind you, there's a recording of this event that'll be available on the festival's York Ideas YouTube channel, which can be accessed from the Watch Again section of the festival. And you'll get an email when the video is available to view. And again, if you'd like to purchase a copy of Frederik's book, In the Service of the Shogun, The Real Story of William Adams, will be available from our partner bookseller, Fox Lane Books, online. So please check that out as well. So, yeah, no, thank you, Frederick, and thanks to everyone. And